Remember to contact me through team email if you need any help or you would like any explaining differently. Hello Year 11 and welcome to today's lesson. Today we'll be looking at getting you ready for your Germany end of unit assessment. So we've been spending the last few weeks looking over the Germany unit, seeing where the gaps in your knowledge are. We're going to spend this week trying to plug a few, so I'll be covering the growth of the Nazi Party in detail today in today's lesson. So this will be laid out like a normal lesson you'd expect. So we'd have our starter, our main activities, and then there'll be some chances for you to ask me some questions at any point if you need to. So to start off with, can you make sure you've got your worksheet open from the assignments area, and can you fill in your starter on there? So put true or false about the statement and then write the correction in. So for example, unemployment rose to 13 million as an impact of the Great Depression is false because the correct answer is it rose to 6 million. And that's what you'd need to do on yours. So you can pause this video and you can go over to your worksheet, have a go at that, and then come back when you're ready for some feedback on this task. So now that you've accessed your worksheet from the resources area and you've typed your answers, you can mark them. So for false, unemployment rose to 13 million is untrue. It rose to just 6 million, which is still a lot of people. Germany experienced hyperinflation in 31. False, Germany did not experience hyperinflation in 1931. So that was the economic depression that it felt in 1931. Hyperinflation was back in 1923, following the Raw crisis. All of these next ones are so all sectors of German society were affected by, so everyone was affected in some way, from business right the way down to your average factory worker. Everyone faced some impact. Reparation repayments were still demanded by the Allies, putting Germany under more economic pressure. That's true. So Britain and France particularly were demanding that they keep getting money back off Germany, even though Germany itself was out of money, because Britain and France also needed money to deal with the depression they were facing. And the next one, the German Chancellor increased taxes, cut wages, and reduced employment benefits. So he put your taxes up, so you had to pay the government more. If you're in a government job, you would pay less are being cut, and you have become unemployed, you're going to receive a much benefit. And finally, the USA continued to loan Germany money during the Depression. False. The USA did the opposite, and they actually called the money that they'd loaned through the Dawes and the Young Act, so in 1923 and 29, they wanted back. So our intent, what we're learning today, why we're learning, how it links to what we have and what we will be learning. Again, so the growth of the Nazi Party links to our theme from last lesson. We look at the Great, but it also links further back when we go to the end of the war and the Treaty of Versailles. So we'll be looking at some of those terms today. Lots of the people that supported the Nazis were also very angry about Versailles and the way it embarrassed Germany. In the future, we will be looking at his actual rise to power as the Chancellor of Germany and the things that he did once he had become Chancellor. The growth of the Nazi Party. So, our objectives today to investigate the impact of the Depression on the rise of extremist parties, with the Nazi Party being an example. Our outcomes to describe the Great Depression and its impact on Germany, so what we started to look at. Our silver to explain the reasons for the growth of the party. Our gold, so grade 5 to 7, to evaluate who voted for Hitler and why. So what groups voted for Hitler, what reasons they have for doing it. Did all of these groups have the same reasons? Analyze an interpretation to explain why people voted for the Nazis. So an interpretation is someone's point of view. To start us off, we've got a source to look at, so it's a bit of here as well, so we're pushing on numeracy skills. for bronze and silver, can you describe what happens to the support of the moderate parties? The moderate parties are in the middle, not too left, not too right, fairly unextreme parties. And what happened to your extremist parties, so the Nazis and the communists between 1928? On your sheet, this is laid out differently. However, you've got this graph to the side and you've got a space that you can write in. You'll see there's space to write your original answer and there's space underneath where you can write your green actions that we'll look at afterwards. If you don't have enough space, just create yourself a new slide or use the blank documents that are attached in the alignment area that you can write in for now. And for gold and platinum, use the graph below and your knowledge explain why the Depression increased support for extreme parties. So pause this video now, have a look at this yourself, and then come back for feedback. Okay, welcome back. Now that you've done the task, you can prove your work in green, and I'll just explain some of the things that we've seen from this graph. So as we can see, after 1928, the support extreme party starts to grow. In 1928, the Democrats the majority seats in Parliament. They've got 150 of them. What we see over this time period is the actual support for the SPD doesn't fall greatly. It only drops as low as about 120 members. It's the rise of the extreme parties which is the main focus, not the decline of SPD. We can see the increase in number of seats from 4%, so it's gone up by 4%, so it's 12 seats, 37%, which is 7%, which is 230 seats by July 1932. So seat support is growing massively if we look at our blue line and where it starts and where it finishes. Next, support for the SPD decreased slightly. It's down, but it's not gone down by a huge amount. And many in Germany felt the SPD was not doing enough, so they lost some support, but it didn't lose all of its support. We also see that votes for the Communist Party started to rise during this period, but they not rose as much as the Nazis. What you will see is the amount of support that the Communist is about the same as the people lost, which sort of shows that people have moved from the Social Democrat Party more to the extreme left to communists, and Nazi have come from people either weren't voting before or were voting for one of the parties that wasn't a main party. So our main task today, it is an information using the information sheets that you've got available on your worksheet in the assignment area. It will be an area that you can fill in your answers, which I will talk you through an example before I leave you on your own. The headings that you've got on your sheet are the Depression, the appeal of Hitler, so why did people like Hitler, discontent of the Weimar government, so discontent with that means discontent is when you're unhappy with something. So discontent is unhappiness with the Weimar government, fear of communism, so that extreme left-wing view that people should own their things individually, everything should be owned by everyone and shared, which obviously if you own anything you're going to be very worried about. And finally, some notes about the Nazi Party, the methods and tactics that it used. So what did it do to try and get people to support it? Gold tier will be to answer the question, which was the most important reason why the Nazis became so popular? So out of those factors, which is most important? And platinum, would the Nazis still be as popular without the impact of Great Depression? So this is asking you to consider the important event. How important was the Great Depression and what evidence you use to back up? I'll now talk you through an example of what your work should look like. So here is what your worksheet looks like. You can see you've got space in all 5 of the boxes to talk about the different topics. An example of an information sheet here is the Depression. So by 1932, unemployment stood at 6 million. I'd say that is very important information. So 1932, employment is 6 million. You don't need to be writing this out word for word, just pick out the important parts. So the Nazis promised to create jobs, which is obviously, if you've got 6 million people unemployed, creating jobs is very important, so I'll underline that. People, the Nazis were offering a clear solution. If you can see that the Nazis are offering a clear solution, maybe that would let you know that the government isn't. So that's for your higher ones. Look at the gold and the platinum question. During the Depression, the Nazi seats rose 12, right the way up to 107. So that is a huge increase in a 2-year period. So I would say these are key notes that you should be putting into your box on the Depression. So what I've underlined is what you should write down in your answer box. So that's just an example to help you. Now I'll pass this over to you. You can pause this video and have a go at the questions. I'll come back when you're ready to feed. All of the timings are on your worksheet for you. A second example in case you're stuck with this. So Hitler is charismatic. Charismatic means he's got a strong personality, he's very likable, he can win you over, he can convince you to do what he wants. And he's convincing people that he can be trusted to make Germany a great nation. He travelled the country making speeches in person, which was very for the time. He actually is the first person to use the aeroplane to travel around the country just to help out get elected. Before him, if a politician wanted to travel, they'd travel by train or travel by horse. So the idea that he's using a plane is very modern, and it's letting people see the sort of future he's promising for Germany. And Hitler came across as one of the people who understood their problems. He was decisively, so decisive means he was a decision maker. He would actually make a decision rather than asking people what to do, and he would fix problems. So that's how people viewed him, and that's why people wanted to vote for him. Discontent with the government, so we can see that Weimar politicians couldn't agree how to help the unemployed and get Germany out of the depression. So they couldn't agree how to help, and they couldn't get me out of the depression. Are your key points. So different chancellors were appointed by President Hindenburg. So Hindenburg is the head of state. So like we said, the Kaiser had been replaced by someone who was elected every 7 years as a president. If we think back to our constitution that we have in our book, but they made very little difference. So what people are seeing, the average everyday person in Germany is seeing, there's little actually coming from the government. It's not doing much. Any ordinary Germans felt that the democratic system wasn't working. So the democratic system is democracy, vote. So people didn't think voting for your leaders working. A lot of people were looking towards having one strong leader who had a lot of power, such as a king or maybe a dictator. So people just didn't agree with democracy anymore. Finally, fear of communism. So this is one of our important factors. German communists, such as the Spartans, at their revolt in 1919, had tried to overtake. Years after January 1919 is when the Spartans were a major problem, straight after World War II, but the war ended back in November of 1918. Alarm the clan and the wealthy, so the people that owned things were very worried about communism because they could lose everything, because they didn't want to lose their wealth positions. That should keep it. So try to take it over. Communism anti-religion, which worried churchgoers. So in Germany, there's large groups of religious people back in the 1930s. Lots of Catholics in the south and lots of Protestants in the north. So two main different types of Christian. And these people were about communism because communists didn't believe that there should be religions. And Hitler said that he would fight communism. It's appealing to people fear communism, and he got support from upper classes. So the sorts of people that had nice jobs, they owned nice things, they vote for Hitler because he was promising to protect what they had. And the last survived is Nazi party methods and tactics, and its structure as well. After the failure of the unit push in 1925, Hitler tried to overthrow the government and was arrested, where he should have had a life sentence. He should have been executed, which was then reduced to 9 years in prison, but he didn't even end up serving 1 year, which shows that the government supported the wing more than the left if we're looking for previous assassins. Hitler changed his tactics. So from after when he came out of prison, that's when he decided he'd win power in elections. So he didn't want to overthrow them anymore, he acted as the leader of Germany. Nazi Party officers set up all over Germany to recruit more followers. So different areas, have your local representative of that party. He'd come try and encourage people. They might do things such as run the local youth club to try and convince people to take on the idea. Because obviously someone who's 10, 11, 12 in 1923, as they start to get towards 1930, they're old enough to vote. They've spent their childhood being supported by the Nazis. And the Nazis are the people that set up the club so that they'd have a kickabout. Or they organised a camping trip on the week so they could go out into the countryside. So these are the Nazis that people enjoy themselves. The SA protected Hitler's meetings, tried to influence voters, so that's important. They protected Hitler's meetings and tried to influence. So the SA were the arm wing of the Nazi Party. These were people like sort of thugs. They'd go around, they'd intimidate people, they'd stand at the doors when Hitler was to make sure only people that he wanted to speak to could come in. They'd intimidate people. If there were people with different views to them, they might beat them up to keep them quiet. And Hitler took part in lots of parades and rallies to show how powerful he was. So he'd walk in the streets, he'd be waving Nazi flags, he'd have people in their uniforms just to show people that this is a powerful party, just to make them look a bit more official. The youth they set up to encourage young people, that's really important. So Hitler Youth Organisation, I would underline that whole bullet point, have that written in your answer. And then new media, so radio, cinema, lots of using microphones and elect speakers, which are new inventions, just to be able to speak to bigger crowds. They were printing newspapers and leaflets so they could really spread to reach a wide audience. Underline that part. So, new media. Pick out some examples for yourself to put down. I would line all of them to come out, and they had a wide reach to a new audience. They appointed a new person called Joseph Goebbels, and he was put in charge of propaganda. So, Goebbels put in charge of propaganda. What propaganda is, if we remember, if you convince someone that your ideas are posters, it's pictures, it's images, it's trying to convince people to agree with your way of thinking. And here it is all in one table for you. You can have a look, see if there's anything you missed when I've talked and explained. Make sure you update your table, anything that you've added in green, resubmit. So if you need to pull a slide, you can read through. And finally, our last task today, we are going to do this analysis. We will look at the source. In your work, you've got a bigger version of this with the bronze, silver, gold, and questions written around it, and I'll explain what's there. You can have a go at it, and then I'll explain in a bit more detail after that. So, the Nazi Party never won a majority in elections, but they were a very good, high-profile party. So they led campaigns. People knew who the Nazis were, even if they weren't going to vote for them. They told what they wanted to hear. They tried to persuade people by making promises to them for what they could deliver. Like the SA from within the Nazis would intimidate people, or they beat them up. They make sure they weren't able to share their opinions. They always put on a good show. They always look very official, very clean, very smart. They look like a respectable organisation. And again, it's all about the promises they made to different groups. So different groups would be promised different things. So how they got messages across is through propaganda, like we're looking here. What it says on this poster, if we look to set in our millions of men without work, millions of children with future, Save German Family, 1932. So this is Nazi propaganda. What you need to do on your sheet. So describe what you think is happening in the war. So you know it's a family, just to give a bit of clue. How does that look? So just describe how do they look based on what you've read about what it says on the source. For gold, what's significant this has been made at this time? Think about what's happening in Germany in 1930. So the impact of the Great Depression. Why is it important? There's an example answer down there to try and help you. There's a bit of a writing frame where you just need to fill in the blanks where ... And then for platinum, how useful is this poster to a historian studying why people voted for the Nazis? So pause this video and over to you. Here we can see how this links into a career. And that is the end of this lesson.